Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, we take a break from talking about childish things like video games so we can talk about toys. Secret is in the tree at the dead end, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society is in the tree with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
It's going great, but man,
Zelda quotes are getting weirder.
the localization of Zelda 1 really making us do work there.
Secret is in the tree at the dead end.
Do we know what that's... I have no idea what that's referring to in the game. Do you know what that's referring to in The Legend of Zelda?
Tree at the dead end. It must be like the entrance to some dungeon or like just cave or something, right? That you have to like burn one of the trees. Turns into stairs, you go down it.
Yep.
That's got to be it. Which one in particular? I don't know. We are, of course, auditioning new phrases from the original Legend of Zelda.
And this is a real don't call us, we'll call you.
That's right. And we are keeping all of these. We're keeping all of their information on file in case we need a bunch of quotes to come in.
Right.
But, we probably not.
Probably not this one.
Probably not this one.
Yeah.
Mark, how you doing? Are you doing okay?
I'm doing great. I know this is not a lost podcast, but really this update is like a disappointing one if you're hoping for lost updates, because I went out of town, totally lost momentum. I'm somewhere in season 5. I'm like so close to the end, but I just have lost the willpower to continue. But I feel like I've got to. The reason I'm bringing it up is to shame myself into just finishing
some accountability.
Just do it.
It's that's a good motivator. Because now I can ask you about it next time. People can ask you about it on Discord. On the Discord email, it's Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. And then you can get in there and harass Mark about not finishing Lost. I have faith in you. I think you'll get back to it.
Yeah.
If you, listener, would like to support us on Patreon, you can. Just go to patreon.com/Nintendo Cartridge Society, where if you're giving at the 8 or 16-bit levels, you get access to our once-a-month episodes of miniseries that we're putting out, which means if you were doing that, you have a fresh new episode of NCS Arcade to listen to.
Yes, we released an episode about Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow, and what that means is that we are going to do a listener feedback episode.
Yes.
So this is your opportunity to send us an email, hit us up on Discord, anything, get in touch with us to tell us your thoughts, opinions, questions about Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow or any of those Igavania Castlevania games. And we will talk about it on the listener feedback episode. And the great thing about those listener feedback episodes that they're available to everyone who follows us on Patreon. So at the free level, at the 4-bit level, 8-bit level, and 16-bit level, anyone can get those episodes. You just have to go over there, follow us for free.
Which also means anyone can email us about Castlevania. So get on that if you have something to say, or if we have some like vital perspective that is missing on Dawn of Sorrow. That'd be great. And neither of us played Aria of Sorrow, so we know there's something that we're missing.
Yep.
So yes, get in there, help us out, help yourselves out. I don't know what I'm saying. The Discord I already mentioned, wove in organically to the conversation that we were having. So I think it's probably just time for us to get into what we're here to talk about today. Let's talk about the toys and gadgets that have made Nintendo over the last decade. Nintendo just put out a brand new toy, a new gadget, a new thing.
Yeah, mine arrived today.
As did mine. I set it up. We're talking, of course, about the Nintendo Sound Clock Alarmo, heretofore referred to as Alarmo, because I don't think it's just easier.
Yeah, it's just easier.
It's easier. It's more fun that way. I set mine up, and so I set it up like on my nightstand. And already, and look, we've talked about like the various like ways in which it doesn't really fit into my lifestyle or my sleep style or my wake up style. And just already in the setup, plug it in, put it on the nightstand. The surface of my nightstand is like maybe 5 inches below the top of my bed.
Oh.
So it already has a hard time like sensing my presence in the bed.
Yeah. Do you have to like calibrate it or anything, or it just
You'd like tell it where like where in relationship to the bed, like what size, first of all, the size of the bed, where like positionally it is around like the head of the bed, and then it's like now like angle it towards the middle and then like move around in the bed. But like I did the sample thing where like it was doing an alarm, and like I moved around and like it did do the sort of like the little sounds that go with that, but then I got out of bed and it didn't stop.
Oh, uh-huh.
I was like, well,
what game and scene have you chosen for your christening of your Alarmo?
So the demo one when you set it up is automatically Super Mario Odyssey. And what I've set it to, so I did set an alarm for like button mode for tomorrow morning. And it'll probably be the last time that this happens. But I did the Pikmin, like the first scene in Pikmin. So, which is like an exploring or gathering resources or something like that is what it's called.
Oh, fun.
Because there are some of them that are like breaking barriers. I'm like, what?
I don't know if it's a joke or not, but somebody posted online like, oh, I'm waking up to the sounds of Pikmin drowning.
That's one of them. Drowning
it.
Pikmin is one of them, which like that's urgent sounding music. Anyway, this is not an episode about the Alarmo or my hyper early impressions of it. What we are talking about, so like this is a thing that Nintendo put out to the consternation of some Nintendo fans, to the delight of you and I, but also to the sort of like questionable utility for ourselves and maybe anyone. But it is so quintessentially Nintendo, a move that like no one else would make. It's just this weird little gadget that falls so far outside of like what a game is or like what a console business is, that we thought we should like kind of reflect on how Nintendo has done this over the course of the last decade-ish, sort of as kicked off by Amiibo.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that was interesting about this is you and I started kind of like formulating what exactly we wanted to talk about, is that it feels like with the kickoff of Amiibo, like 10 years ago in 2014, that Nintendo got back into creating toys and gadgets and things that, because we were, casting our minds back to the Wii U generation, or even like the Wii and DS generation, or even before that.
And we were doing this like Doctor Strange. We were like floating in the air with our legs crossed. We were like shaking our head around real fast. We were exploring different past timelines.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was like. Charlize Theron showed up and we're like, you're never coming back.
Yeah, we're like, who is that? What happened to your third eye, my guy?
And like Nintendo very early in its life has a history as a toy maker. Became like a video game powerhouse, and then just kind of stealthily got back into making, like toys and gadgets.
Yeah, well, and like it is, before the NES, obviously there were things like the Game & Watch, like individual handheld games that would only ever have like a single game on them. But like prior to that, there's the Ultra Machine, that's sort of like the pitching thing. There's the Ultra Hand, the like grabber, and like little baseball games and stuff like that would be like those were like the gadgets of before, and like that sort of merged with the console business with like Rob the Robot or the NES Zapper, and then like on into the Super NES with like the Super Scope. But then it like really dies out, and like outside of like the odd peripheral here and there, the like physical things that Nintendo's making are just like the hardware that you play games on, right? Like that's those are Game Boys, those are DSs, those are GameCubes, and it's really not until Amiibo shows back up on the scene that like the aperture there like widens and Nintendo is like back to making toys and making gadgets.
Yep.
So should we just start with that data point of amiibo?
Yes.
So amiibo first announced, or first the first chunk of them go on sale June 10th, 2014. We probably talked about the 10-year anniversary of amiibo when it happened, right?
I don't remember
At
us
least a
talking
little
about
bit?
it. Yeah, I don't know.
We have yet to rank all of the amiibo, but like we could.
We could.
It would take too long, and I don't want to do
I'm
it.
imagining like a bracket, like March
Yeah, that's
Madness
right.
style bracket.
Just
to-
eliminating amiibo by the handful. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do that.
because it does feel like we may be at the end of amiibo.
Yes, very possibly. I mean, like Nintendo did. We did get new Splatoon amiibo not that long ago. The variations of the idols from 2 and 3. But yeah, that's that and the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 are like the other ones that came out this year, and I think that's probably it for the whole year.
Well, I mean, I don't think I really internalized that amiibo are 10 years old. That's a really long time for Nintendo to do anything.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean that's like Game Boy life, right?
Right, yeah.
And even that like went through the iterations from like OG Game Boy to Pocket to Color, before finally shifting over after like 12 years to Game Boy Advance, right? But yeah, like Amiibo as a line, I feel like shifted what it, because like in the early days, Amiibo were very, they were launched as part of like an add-on for Smash Brothers 4, right? For Wii U and 3DS, and like were pitched as like the physical embodiment of the trophies that you would earn in the game. They were in the same poses, like which meant that they had like some weird little support structures on them to hold them up. Link famously with that like yellow stand that like was coming out of his butt. But like so they like inherently married to Smash Brothers, and then had this sort of deep functionality with the game in a way that I don't think any amiibo since then like even attempted.
Right. It feels like, generally speaking, amiibo support in a game means you scan the amiibo and you get some items.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And that's like with rare exception, like that was it. But like in Smash Brothers, both in the Smash 4 and in Ultimate, that like you can like raise an amiibo fighter by like scanning them into an amiibo, and then like train them so they like gain levels and they like learn to fight in different ways or specific ways. I think there was even more customization in Smash 4 where you could like set their moves even a little bit, that there were like customized moves that you could earn throughout the course of the game, save to the amiibo, and then you could like deploy them in fights as you wanted to.
Every time we talk about Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and like that all of this
Yes.
exists within that game.
Yeah,
It's
it's
so
insanity.
crazy. It's almost like I feel like Super Smash Brothers, whatever's next, almost by necessity has to reset itself, because
Yes.
it's becoming like Microsoft Windows, where it, like every game
Yes.
is required to support everything from the previous games, and that's just that it's just remarkable that exists and nobody died making it.
Yes. That we know of.
That we
right?
know of.
Like so maybe someone did. We don't know. But so that's where like Amiibo comes from, right? As a sort of like foundational part of Smash Brothers. But like it kind of quickly morphs into just like the Nintendo collectible, right? And like there are I mean, there was a while where it was like every new first party Nintendo game had amiibos to go with it.
Box Boy got an amiibo.
Box Boy did get an amiibo, not in North America.
No. So sad.
I covet that one.
QB.
Still. QB.
I looked online one time to see how much they're going for, and it's very expensive.
I'm sure it's a lot. We'll actually get to that same sort of phenomenon on a couple of these things as we go down the list. But yeah, I don't know. Anything else that we want to say? We could probably have an entire conversation just about like Amiibo and what it's done for the company. But like, there is like a specific beat that I want to talk about here that like, when they were rolling these things out, there were some of them were like retailer exclusives, and they launched them in like very specific waves where they were like, okay, we're releasing 6 amiibos, in like a month, and pre-orders go live now, and it like became a like Nintendo event to be like online trying to get the pre-orders at all the various places that you needed to, and that like you'd miss out on some. I remember, early on jokes being like, "Oh yeah, did you know that the Rosalina amiibo is an eBay exclusive?" Like that's because you're never going to get one from its like original source. It's always going to be like some kind of big weird hassle. And again, we will talk about that later in this conversation. But like this did feel a little bit like Nintendo figuring out supply lines. And maybe they're there now, maybe they're not. I mean, we'll see when Switch 2 launches, but it feels like they have gotten through some of that like hyper scarcity of stuff, right?
Yeah, it does feel like these first couple of ones, they definitely had growing pains, if that's what it was, which is like
Yes.
getting back in the groove of manufacturing these things and operationally supplying them to retailers and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and like having that, and we've talked about this before too, but like as video games have become more of a like digital storefront kind of thing, even on like the console side, that Nintendo would introduce Amiibo as a product that you would necessarily need to engage with one of their retail partners in order to get, seems like a good relationship building thing that like the other console manufacturers weren't doing.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So that like they could still be assured shelf space when they did release a Nintendo Switch, right?
Were there any games, maybe Amiibo, the Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival or something, like that required Amiibo in order to play?
Well, so there was that one, and there was the was it just called like Mario and Friends? It was the Mario versus Donkey Kong like game that was free on Wii U and 3DS, but you had to like scan Amiibo into it to play those levels.
I don't remember that.
It's kind of cool. I've got it on both platforms, so we can check it out. I think those were Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival, which was like sort of a Mario Party with Animal Crossing, except like there were no mini games.
So all the worst parts
of Mario Party. Yeah, that's right. That game is infuriating. Have I never made you play Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival?
It. Yeah,
we gotta, Mark. And you only need the amiibo to roll the dice in the game. Like each player has their own amiibo, and so you like take your turn by putting your amiibo on the gamepad and rolling the dice.
It just sounds more confounding.
Yeah.
The more you talk about it. But the reason I ask is because it's interesting that Amiibo came out around the time of the Toys to Life craze, like Skylanders and Disney Infinity, but Nintendo never really used it that way. Never,
right?
It wasn't like you bought Amiibo and then those Amiibo became part of a game. They were just like toys.
Smash, sort of, but even still, like
Smash,
those characters were in the game still, right? If you were playing Skylanders, like you had to have the Spyro amiibo or whatever it was called. It wasn't called an amiibo. The Spyro Skylander figure in order to actually like play as that character. And ditto Disney Infinity, right?
Right.
Or the Lego Dimensions was another one like that. So I mean you're right that they didn't really gate a lot of content behind having the amiibo, because also that like just kind of feels gross. Like
there's some weird exceptions, like was it Metroid Dread that had the like hard mode or something gated behind the Samus amiibo?
I think that was the Samus Returns definitely had like a hard mode that was gated behind one of the amiibo.
So maybe it was Samus Returns.
Yeah, Skyward Sword had fast travel that was kind of gated behind the amiibo. The Twilight Princess HD remaster had the like wolf, like Trial of the Wolf, whatever. That was gated behind the amiibo that they sold with it. And then also that you could scan into Breath of the Wild and have the Wolf Link run around with you. But like, yeah, I realized we just named like 5 or 6 things that were like expressly gated behind amiibo.
But that's over 10 years.
That's over 10 years.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And everything else is all, just as you said, like 3 times a day you can scan an amiibo and get like some items.
Uh-huh. My favorite amiibo is probably the box of Super Mario Odyssey cereal that had an amiibo built into it.
Yep. And when you scanned it in Mario Odyssey, it recognized it and called it a delicious amiibo. I still have my box of Mario cereal.
Ooh, I wish I did. I wish I still had mine.
Also, always a bummer that they never got like really crazy with amiibo. I guess that's they still could, but like the cereal box and the yarn Yoshis were like the only ones that were like outside of the format of just like the little statue.
The only
you know?
there's like a, I mean, it is just a statue, but it's a big one. It's like the 8-bit Mario. That one's like oversized,
it's
right?
Not, it's a little oversized, but it's not that big. The 8-bit and the Detective Pikachu amiibo was very large.
Yeah,
as
that's right.
well. And then there was the large yarn Yoshi.
But you're right. You can put an NFC chip in anything.
In anything, right?
Yeah.
Like you could sell like rocks glasses, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be cool,
you could,
right?
You could. You
Don't
could
know
put
why.
one in an Alarmo.
You could. Maybe Alarmo's an amiibo. We don't know. It's probably not. And all of that is works with the Wii U, the 3DS, or the new 3DS, which had the NFC reader in it, and Switch. But
What would you say, in your opinion, is the peak era of amiibo? Because it felt like we had a time, maybe like halfway, like 5 years ago, where I don't really know.
Mark
I'm
just did a
like,
little shrug. It was,
like
it was
5
very
years
charming,
ago ish.
yes.
But this is why I'm curious from your perspective, as somebody who collected amiibo, like when it was, because it felt like there was a time where we were getting amiibo announcements constantly, and then the last few years, once Smash Ultimate ended with their amiibo run, you still get them from time to time.
Yeah.
Like you said, it wasn't that long ago that the most recent Splatoon 3 ones came out, but at the same time, it definitely feels like it's sparser.
Oh, I mean, it absolutely is sparser now. I mean, we are back in the period where we don't have any announced amiibo for anything. And like, with the Echoes of Wisdom would have been a perfect time to put out a Zelda like in that toy style. So it feels like it's a not a going concern anymore. But when was the height of it? I don't really know. Maybe around the time that they were launching the like Super Mario Brothers line of amiibo, right? Where that was just because the Smash line was like in full gear at that point, where we were getting like new waves every couple months. And the like Splatoon ones were coming out, like, so maybe around then, which maybe would have been about the time that we started the show.
Yeah. I remember the Cloud one.
Yeah.
In my mind, that stood out as like a big moment for amiibo.
Right. Well, because they released 2 versions of Cloud, like Player 1 and Player 2, because he's like in one is in the like Final Fantasy VII costume, and the other is in the Advent Children costume. So
Which
there was
one
a little
do you
bit.
have, or do you have both?
No, I just have the Player 1, the Final Fantasy VII one. But like they did the same thing with like Bayonetta, that there's 2 different versions of that. And like that's where I'm like, all right, guys, settle down. But like they really, like, if people went like all out and were like genuinely tried to collect every amiibo, that represents like a huge investment, both in money and time, and I guess also space, to just like store these things. So like, yeah, there was a long time where I was like, one of my favorite Nintendo games is trying to buy Nintendo products, and it was always in reference to amiibo.
I don't. So Masahiro Sakurai did a video on his YouTube channel about all of his gaming collection, his consoles and controllers and games, and it's just massive. And that was just the ones in his like home. But I wonder if he collects amiibo.
I'm sure he gets one of every one.
Sure,
he
yeah,
he must. But yeah, I mean, if I were him, I would just have them like in the garage somewhere.
Right? Yeah. He probably has that QB one though.
He's got that QB one. So jealous.
We're gonna national treasure and like break into.
Yeah, I love this.
Yeah.
I also I kicked myself a little bit for not getting the Shovel Knight 3-pack of amiibo, where they did one of Plague Knight, King Knight, and Spectre Knight. I have the Shovel Knight amiibo himself, but not the other 3. Should have done it. It's just like, especially if it's like a 3-pack, or when they would do like a wave of amiibo, it's like a genuine expense to buy.
It's a lot.
Like a 3-pack is going to run you like $60, and it's like, oh geez, okay, all right.
Well, that's why it's so surprising to me. And look, this episode is not about amiibo.
We're
We are
not
going
just
to talk
talking about
about other things. But like amiibo is a good example of Nintendo having this other revenue stream that is not games. It's just another physical thing that people were buying that was like Nintendo. And that's why it's interesting to me to see them either lose
Kinda
interest
phase it out,
or
yeah.
just kind of like phase it out, because what replaces that?
Right. I mean, exactly. And there was a period where I was like, I wonder how much money. This is before Ultimate came out, but I was like, I wonder how much money I've spent on Super Smash Brothers 4. And I was like, okay, so I bought the Wii U version and the 3DS version. That's $100 right there. Okay. And then I bought all the DLC characters, and so like that's another, I don't know, like $40, whatever, to buy them between both platforms. And then I was like, okay, and then Amiibo, and it's just like, oh yeah, I don't know, have I spent like $700 on Smash Brothers?
Right.
Right.
Then Ultimate comes out.
And then Ultimate comes out, and I do it all again. I don't buy the Amiibo again, but I buy all the DLC again. So yeah, it's you're right that like its importance as like a revenue stream, or just like a way to tap me specifically for additional cash, is interesting, and I think sort of like does fit along the lines. We'll see that repeated again here later in the list, which I think we should proceed down now. I think we've said everything we could about Amiibo. Next up here is the Pokemon Go Plus.
Yes, this was released September 16th, 2016.
Right. So, we're in the pre-Switch days, but the post Pokemon Go phenomenon, right? And this is a thing that allows you to play Pokemon Go without engaging with your phone as much.
Yes, and this was developed by Nintendo. So this was created by Nintendo, released. I never owned one, but it was just like a little like almost like keychain top type.
Yeah,
like,
with just like a button on it. So like you had the ability to like spin Pokestops and like do other things by like clicking on it.
Yeah,
and it would like,
I think it buzzes
made
or
noise.
Yeah.
And kind of just by virtue of how successful Pokemon Go was, it's like, oh yeah, they needed to sell like some other kind of like accessory to go along with it.
Yeah.
I don't think we really have too much to say about the Pokemon Go.
Classic
Go
us, classic Pokemon.
We don't really know that much about Pokemon. Speaking of classic, next up on the list is the NES Classic Edition, released November 10th, 2016. Mark, I vividly remember this thing coming out.
Oh yeah, this was, I mean, the only reason I own one is because you were able to secure one for me.
Right. So this was not something that Nintendo had released no pre-orders for. It was just sort of so what the thing is, right? It is a tiny NES that has 2 controller ports on it. The controller ports, for some reason, use the input of the like Wii remote like accessory add-on thing. It comes with 30 NES games loaded on it. A lot of them first party, but some like partner games on there that were pretty exciting, right? Like Final Fantasy's on there, Mega Man 2, I believe, Ninja Gaiden, and a handful of others. Star Tropics is on there.
Yeah, I think
that's first party, but
was Chrono Trigger on there?
No, NES.
Oh, NES. Yeah.
And I don't think Chrono Trigger's on the Super NES either. Final Fantasy
Super Mario
3
RPG is?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's right. But we're not to that one yet.
No. Forget I said anything about that.
Yeah, just it'll
be a surprise.
Pretend you didn't hear it. So this was a $60 product, right? That they were selling. Came packed with one controller. You could theoretically buy a second controller. But as I said, they were not available for pre-order anywhere. And it was just sort of like go to Target, go to Best Buy, go to Toys R Us, whatever. Toys R Us was still around at that point, right?
I think so.
And like hope you get one. Go
And
ahead.
it really was mini. Like
It's very small,
It fits in the
yes.
palm of your hand. You turn it on, pushing the button just like you would on
Yep.
an NES. And it has like amazing system music.
Oh,
You
that
can
music's
choose
so
from like the
good.
different games. Like it really is a treat.
Yes, and like is a further treat in that like it is imminently hackable.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
like you can put basically all the NES library on this thing pretty easily. But when it launched, this is maybe the worst I've ever seen a Nintendo product launch in terms of like availability and people being able to get it the day it was released.
Truly a disaster.
It was a just like unmitigated disaster. I had gone to I think I was taking the day off from work to get this thing. And my plan was to go to Target shortly after it opened and buy one. But I had gotten a text from friend of the show, Hannah, and a previous guest on the show, who lived in Milwaukee. So, 2 hours ahead. And she'd been like, I went to pick mine up and there was like a line. Like if this is a big deal here, it's got to be a big deal by you too. So like, and this was maybe at like 5:30 in the morning. I'm getting this text from Hannah. So I went to Target like right then. Was just like, Sarah, I'll see you later. I gotta go deal with this. And so I'm standing in a line that's probably there's maybe like 10 people in front of me and like 30 people behind me.
And they were limiting it to one per person.
One per person, and one extra controller per person while supplies last. I like had called back to Sarah and like, can you go to like a Best Buy and like stand in line there and we'll try to like get a second? Because my original plan was like, yeah, we'll buy as many as we can. They'll be great Christmas gifts, right? And the Target that I was at, I believe, had 17 NESs total and like 4 controllers.
Man,
like it was just like an absolute like it just didn't work. So Sarah got one at the Best Buy that I met her at like after I had secured mine. That's the one that we ended up giving to you. But like this was just like Nintendo did not anticipate demand for this thing.
No, and the other weird thing is that they didn't really restock it either.
Right. Again, this came out November 10th, which like the perfect Christmas gift.
It really was $60.
Right.
Yeah, for this thing.
For 30 games.
Yeah. I remember this was around the time, I don't think they do it anymore, but Amazon had this thing called Treasure Truck.
Yes.
Do you remember this? Especially I think maybe in like larger cities, but in LA they did this as well. But in LA they had this like Treasure Truck, and so I remember that this was an item that they were using, and I remember trying to, because I still had it in my mind, this would be a great Christmas present for like somebody,
and it still would have been. It would have been.
And so the Treasure Truck was going to be at the Grove, which is an outdoor mall in LA, and I went there and it was just complete madness.
Right.
And Nintendo would learn their lesson with the Super Nintendo Classic Edition like a year later, but the NES Classic Edition, I think they did. There were some restocks here and there, but they never. It wasn't like they ever really turned up the engine and were like, okay, we're just pumping these things out.
Right. And like, let's take a second here just to like talk about the relationship between this thing and there would be like a Genesis like Classic Edition and a PlayStation Classic Edition that like came out after, and like there were always like kind of more bootleggy sort of things like this that had just a bunch of like Genesis games or whatever loaded onto it that would just like fill up the end caps at like CVS or whatever. It's just part of like that Nintendo magic, that Nintendo fanaticism. I don't really even know where to place it. Like what made this product so coveted, but like they were not properly calibrated to meet the covetedness of the fandom.
Do you think that they underestimated demand, or do you think that it was like a calculated choice? Because that's always the question with like
Sure, right.
Nintendo shortages. Is it a purposeful thing to drive hype, or is it just like a miscalculation?
They could have manufactured, distributed, and sold twice as many as they did, and the hype and rarity would have felt just as high.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it simply was nowhere near the demand, and it's not like an ongoing, growing platform. Like when people couldn't get it in the first couple weeks, they were just like, "Well, forget it." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
It's
totally.
it's a cool product, but like it's not one that you like think about for a long time. Like you get it or you don't. And like I think you can probably get your hands on one now. For
I would
not
guess
that
so.
much.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The only other observation I wanted to make about it is you could get the NES, those extra controllers, theoretically.
Right.
But they also had a notoriously short cord.
Oh my God, yes.
So it wasn't like if your couch is, and there was no like Bluetooth option.
Right.
And so if your couch was, across the room from your TV, which is pretty common nowadays with like,
Totally.
like big TVs and everything, you were still pretty much sitting on the floor in front of your TV, unless you had the system next to you and like a
long HDMI
cord or
something. Which is what I have, and partially to use this thing, because to like go back to the game selection or to use like save states, you had to put push the reset button on the system itself. So like it is like of questionable like engineering and like a weird product, but like still just so cool.
Yeah, and in some ways it's like, I don't know, that's how it was back in the day.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
I don't know. I guess. Okay, so the next beat that we have on here is the Super NES Classic Edition, which came out the following year, less than a year later, in September 29th. 2017. Has fewer games in it, but a lot of them are like meteor experiences. I believe it's 22 games in the Super NES Classic Edition, including
Star Fox 2.
Including the world premiere of Star Fox 2.
And that was a shock.
Yes.
When they pulled Star Fox 2 out, because they didn't need to do it. This thing would have sold.
Right.
Great.
Yes.
But it is kind of fun after all these years to be able to have that work out there, to have Star Fox 2 exist, and to be like, oh, this is why they didn't release it.
Oh, it's bad. That's why. And Star Fox 2 has since come out on NSO, so it is not solely orphaned on this machine, which was a little bit easier to get a hold of. Came with 2 controllers, higher price point, $80. Yeah, go ahead.
They also like continued to manufacture it for over a year.
Yes.
Like they didn't stop manufacturing it until 2018. And so but it's the same adorable tiny little system that fits in the palm of your hand, looks like an NES. This is one that I think it would be fun to have the Famicom version, and it would be fun to have the Super Famicom version with like those colors and controllers and everything.
I mean, I think I would rather have the Famicom Classic Edition, just because it those controllers are so different, and like the form factor of that thing is so different. But yeah, I mean, in both cases, I like them both.
But yeah, and this is again, great system music, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But another example of Nintendo doing something twice and then being content.
Yes.
Feeling no need to continue.
No such thing as the rule of threes for them. And you and I mean, we, I think we're a little bit convinced that, like, this is a thing that Nintendo does now. This is part of their repertoire. And, we did, like, Game Boy Classic Editions as like, thought exercises for the show.
Yeah,
right?
I think there's an episode for Game Boy Classic Editions, I think. And then I think there's one for a theoretical
64,
Nintendo 64.
Yeah, we definitely did them both. And also, so this is the first of these toys, gadgets, whatever you want to call them, that releases after the Switch comes out, right? So like, it's so like the NES Classic Edition is after the Switch has been revealed but not really explored, and then the Super NES comes out. I mean that this is about a month before Mario Odyssey comes out, and it feels like did they need to do this?
Right, because the NES Classic Edition feels like what we were speculating would maybe happen this year, which is like, maybe like kind of a weird year.
Yes.
They're not ready to reveal the new system yet, so a way to goose revenue is to release one of these like hardware things. And the NES Classic Edition definitely feels like that, where it's like, okay, the Switch isn't out yet. Right. It's going to be a rough winter for the Wii U. So we have like this thing.
Right, they're snowed in. They're probably gonna have to like start eating the weaker members of their party, and they're like, "No, we can release the NES Classic Edition."
But you're right. The SNES Classic Edition, that just feels like it already had the momentum, and so it was coming out, maybe hedging their bets with what would happen with the Switch.
Again, it came out 4 weeks before Super Mario Odyssey. So like, what's happening?
Yeah.
Like it seems like it's a desperation play, but like they weren't desperate at this point.
But they wouldn't have known that ahead of time.
They would not have known that, yes. But yeah, I don't know. I think the Super NES, they're both really cool systems, and I'm glad I have them both.
Yeah, me too. I don't get them out and play with them very often anymore, but like Alarmo, it's one of those things I'm really glad that I have. I do think that when I think of how crazy a year Nintendo had in 2017, I don't really think of the SNES Classic Edition, but that's also a part of it. Like when you consider that's a really good year for Nintendo.
Shall we move on now to the next piece here? Because again, this is not something they replicate again in the future.
Right.
Next up is the kickoff of Nintendo Labo. April 20th, 2018. They release the first two like Labo packs, the Variety Pack and the Robot Pack, right? And they would later follow up a couple months later with the Vehicle Pack, and then still within the same year, right? The VR Pack.
I can't remember how long it took VR to come out, but yeah, maybe in the same like 365 days.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If not in the same calendar year, then within 1 year. And we've talked a little bit about Labo because, like, on previous shows, just because like we've talked about that sort of when Nintendo launched the Switch, that there was this idea that they were going to be introducing more ways to interact with the system beyond like using it as a regular video game console.
Yeah, that was a big talking point that they had on like investor calls. What was the I'm blanking on the name of the like interim president of Nintendo that was the head of Nintendo Ltd at this time, Kimishima, maybe? I can't remember, but anyways, that was like one of his things is we are going to be introducing new ways for people to be using their Switch, and the Labo was really kind of the probably the most prominent display of that Nintendo ended up releasing.
Well, and prominent because they were also trying to position it as like something of a like a classroom aid or like museum thing where like there's some sort of like STEM / like educational / creative component to it.
Yeah, this is the one that of Nintendo's, like products, the one that I remember being marketed like with children in it.
Yes, that is a great point. Yeah, that like that's which we noted along the release of the Alarmo that like it's not kids in any of these videos. Like the alarm clock, the Nintendo sound clock Alarmo, seemingly not intended for use by children.
Yeah, I can't remember if we talked about that on mic or off mic.
Great question.
But yeah, like because it seems like an obvious Alarmo seems obvious for use by children,
right?
But not featured in the advertising anywhere.
Too weird to be like this clock watches your child sleep.
It doesn't watch it.
It doesn't watch it, but it does.
But it notices.
It knows. But yes, so the Labo is like expressly a thing for children and is expressly like a creative meant to like engage your like engineering brain in one capacity or another. I had I had the variety kit and the vehicle kit. Loved putting those things together. Would mess around a little bit with the software afterwards, but like they're super shallow gameplay experiences there. But like the piano was probably like the deepest, coolest, most interesting thing. That it was a playable octave wide piano that used like reflective tape and the IR sensor and like rubber bands and stuff to make a playable musical instrument.
Yeah, you and I and Sarah and friend of the show, previous guest Richie Root, like put some of them together and went through that exercise. It was really fun. It was really fun to put together. Some of the vehicle kit, you could use it to drive in Mario Kart. They did an update for that.
Yeah, you sure could.
And I think I bought the Labo VR kit and we put it together and did like an episode on that.
We had less fun with that.
Yes, it's one of the few episodes, maybe only episode that we've ever redone. We recorded an entire episode on it.
Right.
And then we're like, wow, we were really negative in that.
Right. It was just like our episode on the last 5 years for NCS Goes Broadway.
Yeah.
Where we like did the episode and we were like, we got to do this again.
Right. And Labo is one of those things. I mean, in a lot of ways, I kind of feel about a Labo how I feel about Alarmo, where I admire that they did it, and I am like in awe of the amount of work that must have gone into the creation of it. And like, imagine, because the prototyping that had to be done and all of the ideas that got discarded,
right?
You know, like because the Labo kits, the fact that they like the sheets of cardboard that you would use and punch things out, and then to be able to turn that into a piano or a home and like all that kind of stuff,
right?
It's just really cool. But I also understand why it didn't set the world on fire.
Right. I mean, there is part of me that it like wonders if they had like kept it around for a little bit longer and like released more sets and like really just it seemed like they weren't not pushing it, but like I think by the time who knows how long Labo was in production before it came out, but like I think they kind of just realized, because April 2018, by the end of that year, Smash Ultimate comes out, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, the core gaming audience has found this thing. I actually don't know that we need to be pursuing things outside of like the gaming audience.
I also wonder if it came too early in the Switch's life.
Oh, that's interesting too.
Just because, like, obviously it's meant for everybody, but it was targeted at children, and I just wonder if a year was like the Switch wasn't cheap. Like if a year was not enough time for it to have penetrated that market enough for it to be successful.
Well, and your point about cheap is another good one, because I believe the giant robot kit was $100, and that the rest of them were all 80. There were two versions of the VR one, and the one that you bought, I think, was like the cheaper.
I think so too.
Of the two, but like. If the cheapest one is this bad VR, and probably it is still like $40 or $50, like that's a lot to, it's like comparable to a like big Lego set or something, right?
Also, once you put
not a big one, but like medium.
Once you put it together, it's harder to take apart than a Lego set.
Absolutely.
Then you just kind of have these things.
I have two big strange boxes on top of my refrigerator that are filled with
that are full of Labo. I do want to point out, I think it was in the Variety Kit, that one of them did use the right Joy-Con with the IR sensor in it.
Yes.
Because you could make a little like vehicle.
Yeah, you could make a little vehicle,
the HD rumble
to move it,
to move it around, and it would you could see through the
you could see through the IR camera.
Sensor, yeah.
Yeah, no, I still have that. It's we decorated it, and like I think it says NCS on it. Like,
we should do like Pinewood Derby races with those
We only have one.
I know.
But yeah, so Labo, like, cool, interesting. I'm glad it was a like beat of this thing. But you're right that like it probably did come out too early. That like Switches weren't everywhere yet. And also maybe came out in a time when like Nintendo was just pivoting away from people needing to interact with the Switch differently.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on.
Yes, to the Pokeball Plus.
Pokeball Plus, arguably just like a controller, right?
Yeah, it was like a controller, but you could also use it for, I guess not like step tracking. So, yes, it looks like I have this. I bought one. It
Yeah.
came out at the same time as Pokemon Let's Go, Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. So that it was released on September 26th. Oh no, sorry, November 16th, 2018. And it looks like a Pokeball
Mm-hmm.
that has two buttons. So like in the eye of the Pokeball is kind of like
It's a thumbstick, right?
thumbstick, and then there's a button on top.
And you could use this to play Let's Go.
Exactly, because
Yeah.
Let's Go it has a very simple control scheme, and for the catching mechanic, you could it had an accelerometer in it, so you could make like a throwing motion,
Right.
and catch it that way.
And you could also use this thing with Pokemon Go, right? Like that's how it was a step tracker.
Yeah, I think
that right?
I pulled up a Wikipedia entry for it. Sorry, a Bulbapedia entry for it because I wanted to make sure that I was getting all of it right. So, you could take it. This one says like players can choose to take a Pokemon from Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee on a stroll and earn rewards for their Nintendo Switch game, including a variety of items and experience for the strolling Pokemon. And I remember this because they talked about like you could put it in there and then it made noise, like you could hear sounds of the Pokemon.
And it came with a Mew inside it.
Yes, that's right.
What an insane little like product thing. And Mark, I had forgotten that you bought this thing. I was I've been playing Pokemon Blue, sort of playing along with the Super NPC guys games club on Red, Blue, and Yellow. And I for a little bit was like, oh, like that'd be a cool thing to own and like to play the Let's Go games. I looked it up. You can't buy these things for less than $200 now.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Huh.
It is like you have a special rare product, Nintendo product now.
And I didn't. This isn't how I played Pokemon Go. Or no, sorry, Pokemon Let's Go.
Right.
I used a regular Joy-Con. That's funny.
It's also like what motivated you to do like because you're not normally the guy getting like the superfluous Nintendo hardware stuff or the Pokemon stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was the novelty of it all.
Yeah.
Again, going back to why I bought the Alarmo without even knowing what it was yet.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and you're right. It did work with Pokemon Go as well. Basically, exactly like the Pokemon Go Plus.
Yeah. Yeah, that you could store a Pokemon in there, and like when you shook it, you would hear it make a sound.
And like by walking, you got like every like 100 steps, you got like half a experience point or something like that, and like all this different reward system built into it.
What a bizarre piece of equipment. I do like the effort to merge Let's Go and Go into like a unified like gameplay experience. I always thought that Nintendo should have done more to connect the mobile and like console experiences, and it didn't happen that much.
I'm also kind of surprised that Let's Go was just
the one game,
with
the two games.
But like the one attempt at that because it sold well.
Yep.
And I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me it was the simplified Pokemon experience that I wanted. I don't like catching Pokemon through battles.
Right.
And so being able to use the Go mechanics, I thought it was great. I would play another one if they did that again.
Well, it's also got like a small enough roster of Pokemon because it's just based on the first two games. That like I don't know the detail in like the level of animation and stuff. Now we're just talking about Let's Go, but like the game was since like the scope is so much smaller than like a regular modern Pokemon. There's just more detail in it.
Yep.
All the kind of stuff that people want in a new mainline Pokemon, but can't have because there's 10 million Pokemon.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on from the Pokeball Plus, we are moving into, of course, the Ring Fit Adventure released October 18th of 2019. Something you and I both kind of scoffed at when it came out initially.
The reveal video I thought was so weird.
Yes.
It's like a male model and a female model, and they just feel so artificial and stilted and fake.
Yep.
That I just remember thinking the whole thing just felt really uncanny. And then, I wasn't that excited about a exercise game.
Right.
So yeah, I totally just kind of dismissed it.
And October 2019 means that it was here, 4 or 5 months before the pandemic really came in earnest. At which point it would be like the workout accessory du jour that like everyone wanted. Secondhand like resellers of this thing like jacked up the price a lot, and Nintendo moved heaven and earth to like get those things back in production, which is when I got one.
Yeah, me too. Bought it during the early period of lockdowns, and it has sold incredibly well. It's one of the 5 games that you can program an Alarmo with.
Yes,
is Ring Fit Adventure.
Currently, there are 2 more on the way,
Uh-huh.
but yes, that it is funny that that's like one of the default ones available on the Alarmo. And as far as like how this is like a hardware or like a gadget toy kind of thing, it's really just in that like resistance ring, which like I'm still not totally sure how the Joy-Con is picking up on what you're doing to the ring.
Right, because you secure the Joy-Con in the ring,
slide it in,
and then the exercise itself is bending the ring in and out, and then you also strap a Joy-Con to your leg,
right?
But it's a really good workout.
Yeah. Sometimes too good. Moving on from Ring Fit Adventure to Mario Kart Live Home Circuit. Sorry, just want to wrap up Ring Fit by saying that launched at $80. So like another like kind of high price point. Just like noting how much Nintendo charges for this stuff. Mario Kart Live Home Circuit. There's a Mario version. There's a Luigi version. This was the like remote control car that you put in a real life space in your house and like set up like little barriers and markers, and then use the switch to control it, and like you could see through the camera in it, right?
Yeah, so the like remote control cars have a camera in it,
right?
And
by like AR,
yes, exactly. I think the barriers that you set up when you were driving would be replaced by Mario Kart
stuff in the game,
or something like that.
Obviously, this is something you or I never got or mess around with at all.
No. But I know it mostly from like compilations online of people chasing their cats around with it. And from the perspective of the car, they make it look like you're going so fast. And then people would cut to, footage and their cat's just kind of like walking or away from it, being annoyed by it. But the tech behind all of it seems really cool.
This is definitely one of those things where, kind of like Alarmo, where I'm like, the tech here is interesting. I'm glad they're playing around with it and like have some sort of like application for it. But I'm like, I don't know that this is like fun or even genuinely works all that well.
And my memory is that it wasn't developed by Nintendo.
Yeah,
that it was developed by like a third party, but one that's not like one of their regular partners,
right?
And published by Nintendo.
Right. And are these? Can you buy one of these now? Like, are they still available? Home Circuit. I'm curious because like I had mentioned that the Pokeball Plus is like definitely not available now unless you want to spend a ton of money for it.
Right.
No, it looks like you can like pretty easily get a Mario Kart Live Home Circuit for about what it cost, $100 back in the day.
I was just looking. Oh yeah, so it was developed by Velan VELAN Studios.
Okay, that's like the software for it was, or the actual like carts themselves.
So Velan was responsible for developing the software, while Nintendo focused on creating the hardware.
I mean, it looks like I can buy one from the Nintendo's US store right now. I'm not going to do it. I will wish list it, however. Okay. But yeah, I mean, what a strange thing. And then also strange that neither of us bit on it. Mostly because neither of us have that much space in our homes in Los Angeles. To set this up. It would just be it would be a total Alarmo. Like just keep it on the shelf somewhere.
Small bit of trivia that I'm just learning after looking this up. So Valen Studios also was the developer of that Knockout City game, which was
Sure.
the like dodgeball Overwatch type
Yes.
thing.
Knockout City was fun for a little bit. All right, moving on.
Moving on.
To just the next month, November 13th, 2020, in celebration of the 35th anniversary of Super Mario, the Game & Watch Super Mario Brothers edition came out, was revealed at the Mario Direct in September, and sort of blew our minds, right?
Yeah, a new Game & Watch thing.
Yes. And this was before we did Game & Watch month.
Yeah.
So we were not super well versed in what Game & Watch even really was. But, so this is a small, like, handheld system that had Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers Lost Levels, and, like, a version of Ball with Mario as the juggler in it. And would...
And a clock, right?
Yeah. Well, yes, as it is a Game & Watch.
But the, yeah, Game & Watch in, like, name, form factor only.
Right.
Because it does include Super Mario Brothers and Lost Levels in their complete form.
Right, and it is just like a small like LCD screen that you can play these games on. So yes, it is not genuinely the old Game & Watch display.
But I didn't buy one, but you did buy one.
Oh yeah,
and if I'm remembering right, you used it as a clock at your office for a while, right? Or was that the Zelda one?
Was I have this my current office now, the Zelda one is up, but I've had both there before. I really like having them like up, and mostly just for the clock display. But every now and then you just like grab it and like play a couple levels of Mario, like that is fun. But yes, another thing that like it was not unlike the NES Classic Edition, this thing was not easily hackable. So I have not seen a lot of people like adding games to it or anything like that. I think it's trickier to do.
Do you remember, was this difficult to get?
No, I don't think it was. I definitely ordered it as though it was going to be difficult to get.
Well, you never know.
You never know. But yeah, I jumped on it right away. And I'm glad that I did, even if it like, in the months and years after its release, like you can get them for cheaper than, I believe they were $60, but that you can get them much cheaper. Should we just, while we're here, talk about the and then we'll loop back to the power up bands, but just talk about the Legend of Zelda version of this?
Sure, which came out 1 year later in November of 2021.
And this is sort of the same form factor, right? But now has quite a few more games on it. This has the original Legend of Zelda. It's got Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link and Link's Awakening on it, plus a version of Vermin where Link is bopping Octoroks instead of like Mr. Game & Watch bopping moles or whatever they are. Probably moles, right?
Probably.
Moles. But it also had the like North American and Japanese versions of all three of those Zelda games, which meant that you could play with the Famicom Disk System soundtracks for Zeldas 1 and 2, and also like the Japanese Zelda 2 Adventure of Link has a lot of little changes in it, and that had never been accessible to me before, and I loved exploring all those little changes in the game.
Another example of Nintendo doing two things, and then being fine with it, ready to walk away.
Right, two things in successive years.
Yeah.
Right? They did the first one 1 year, the second one the next year, and then we're like, okay, we're done.
And this is one where I have to actually, when I was compiling this list, I had to remind myself that a Kirby Game & Watch was just one that we had talked about being a perfect fit.
It'd be so good.
But was not a real thing that actually exists in the world.
It could be pink. It could have Kirby's the first two Kirby games on Game Boy.
Yeah, it could be like mouthful mode.
Yeah,
Kirby where he swallowed a Game & Watch.
But they
it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. It does not exist.
They just did it twice, and that was good enough for them.
And walked away. Okay, and then sorry to jump back in time now. The Super Nintendo World power up bands.
Yes. So these are the accessories that they sell at Universal Studios, Japan, and Hollywood that are to be used at Super Nintendo World.
Yes, and you use them to like interact with things in the park. It's also like how it keeps track of like your points and coins and stuff that you earn, which then you can see on your. I guess you don't. It doesn't keep track. That's like what sends it to your account on the phone, right?
Right. Exactly. And in as kind of like a vestige of the Wii U era, you earn stamps.
Yes,
That's
right.
You can download like the Universal Studios mobile app, and then as you do things in the land, you earn stamps for participating, which was one of the days these days we'll have to talk about stamps because Nintendo was really
It's true.
into it in the Wii U era as kind of an achievement system type thing that they were doing.
Yeah.
And
maybe we're about to see again in this like playtest thing that I signed up for, but
Yeah,
technically
that's-
can't talk
maybe.
about. Who knows?
Maybe.
We don't know.
But yeah, the power up bands are pretty cool. I wish that I would have remembered to bring it to Universal Studios Japan
Yeah.
when I went, but
But if we end up going for like the
holidays,
times,
yes.
we will bring them then. They released 6 bands: Mario, Luigi, Toad, Yoshi, Daisy, and Peach. And then later released like a gold Mario band,
right.
and that was it. Why not release another character?
Yeah. Rosalina.
Why not a Rosalina? Well, also like give me a villain. Let me be one of the Koopa kids.
Let me be a shy guy. Dry Bones.
There we go.
Roy.
Nabbit.
Now I'm just naming.
Right.
Now we're just naming
Mario
characters.
Monty Mole. All right, moving on to the Pokemon Go Plus Plus. Now, styled this way. Pokemon Go, the words as normal, the word plus, and then a plus sign.
Yeah, so just like the original Pokemon Go Plus in 2016, with a plus sign
Yes.
appended to it.
Which is this is just like another different.
So this is the one that they released around the same time as Pokemon Sleep.
Yes.
So it could be
We're
used...
entering the sleep era.
Yeah,
here.
so
Yes.
it could be used for Pokemon Go, just like the Pokemon Go Plus could be.
This was more of like a big fat disc.
Yes, that
Yeah.
you would like set up and then place on your pillow to help monitor your sleep, like in a replacement, I guess, for placing your phone on your bed.
Right. Which, like, good. Let's not encourage having the phone in the bedroom, right? And in the bed with you. Yeah, I don't know. This one feels like kind of a weird product.
Not for
Even-
sale anymore. Like
okay.
when you go to Nintendo's website, it's out of stock.
Do you remember? How much this thing was?
I don't,
what
but
it
I bet
was?
I could find out.
I bet it was a lot of money. Which is just sort of a running theme for all of this stuff. I forget how expensive the power bands were too, but power up bands, they're like 50
I think
or
they're
60
like
bucks.
$40 or
40
something
bucks?
like that.
That makes sense.
Let's see. The Pokemon Go Plus was $54.99 in the US.
So almost $60 there as well. Which, you know, like it makes sense that like any of these things that are like physical products do end up like costing some real money, but you know, $60 is also a lot.
Yeah.
And then moving right along to the most recent one is the Alarmo Nintendo Sound Clock, released October 10th for $100 in the sort of like pre-release version of it, just to people who have Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pack, or no, not the expansion pack, but just Nintendo Switch Online accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And going wide next year. It's still early days with this thing to like figure out if it's going to have any kind of like impact. I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts about Alarmo that we haven't shared already?
Yeah, it's the other thing about it is that the stakes feel so low.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Like it Nintendo was able to do their thing. They released it, and then whatever ends up happening happens.
Right. And like I don't expect this thing to like light the world on fire.
I don't really either. But just like, you know, the really the only thing on this list that seems to be forever is amiibo. That lasted 10 years. Everything else, you know, even like the Pokemon Go plus Pokemon Go is still incredibly successful. I don't think they make either of those accessories anymore.
I mean, why would you need to, right? I mean, and also the Pokeball Plus, like that is something that they could put out another one of those like They could just like keep manufacturing them and people will probably buy it.
Yeah.
But, like they just don't.
Yeah, so it does make me wonder if like Alarmo is meant to be a continuing revenue stream, or if they will manufacture it for like a year or whatever, and it'll
Right.
have served its purpose.
And then they'll forget about it. It'll go the way of PSVR 2. PlayStation catching strays. Okay, so we've just spent like an hour talking about various Nintendo toys and gadgets, and so now maybe just worth reflecting on like how we feel about this arm of Nintendo, right? Like, we tend to like the sort of what this says about Nintendo and their approach to creativity, but are we really just here for the games?
The items on this list that we are the most excited about, other than Alarmo, are games.
Yeah, and I would say we were more excited about, you're talking about like the classic editions and the Game & Watches, and I'd say that we were more excited about those than we were about Alarmo.
Definitely get more use out of them, I think.
I think so too.
Yeah, looking at this list, it does feel like the past 10 years have been the most that we've seen Nintendo explore these like toys and gadgets outside of the core consoles and games for a while, for like a long time. But it's hard to know, is this just like a blip? Did Nintendo, is Alarmo just the final product of a long, arduous exploration within Nintendo, like with the quality of life stuff that they just needed to get out of their system?
Right. Or just put something out as a result of all of that?
Or is it an offshoot of them having one video game system now and so looking for other revenue streams? Like, it's just so hard to say.
Or even just like more ways to keep the sort of like the physical production side of the company limber, right? Like to just be like exercising those muscles so that you can put out physical products and like all those relationships are still in place and all that kind of stuff.
Or are these physical products just another way for them to get more people to sign up with Nintendo accounts? Because they seem to really care about that.
Right. Yeah. And and it's funny that we've pivoted immediately from like, how do we feel about this to like, how does it work for Nintendo? Because it's tough to say how we feel about it, right? I in some ways, I wish that like amiibo would come back and like come back stronger and like more meaningful to like gameplay experiences. But in other ways, I'm kind of like, thanks for the relief from buying amiibo. So I don't really know how I feel about this stuff. I think I like it, in that I like engaging with Nintendo stuff, and like having these physical things, these toys, these gadgets. It's just like there's nothing else like it.
I think that's it for me, is like the novelty of it, where a video game console and a new game being released can be really fun and exciting, but because it is so rare that we get to interact with Nintendo in these different like physical forms, it does feel fun to have those opportunities.
The most fun Nintendo game is trying to buy Nintendo products, I will always say. All right, Mark, let's close this out. All right, that is going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. If you, dear listener, have some kind of Nintendo toy in mind that we did not mention, either as context or something that happened over the last decade that you want to bring up, you can email us, nintendocartridgesociety@gmail.com, or use that email address to get in the Discord, and we will chat about it there. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much to our 16-bit patrons, Connor McKay, Patrice Millette, Kyle Seaborn. We appreciate you all. We appreciate everyone who's listening to the show or interacting with us in any way. So thank you so much for that. Anthony DeLuca made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers, saying thank you for listening.